Hey, it's John Reed, JohnnyRP.com. I've gathered the usual suspects for a transatlantic SAP Enterprise Mobility meltdown. What's up, Kevin Benedict, John Appleby?
Hey, everything's good. Thanks, John.
Yeah, pretty good. I'm stuck in a hotel room, I'm afraid, but there you go.
So we have, what, like 20 or 30 minutes to demystify SAP Mobility and leave our viewers with a crystal clear understanding?
Or mystify.
Can we do it, or are we just going to further unravel the onion?
Well, let's see where we go, John, but I think we can do something in that time.
All right, well, John, let me ask you, what were your lingering questions after Sapphire with mobility? I mean, I know we learned a lot more at Sapphire. We had some good conversations with some Sybase folks there. What were your lingering questions after the conference, and what have you been chewing on this summer?
Well, I mean, I think as we've spoken about before, the really nice thing about Sapphire was it laid out a strategy and a roadmap in a way that we hadn't really seen publicly prior to this, which I think is really positive. The real lingering questions I think that remain are, when is this product really ready for the prime time, and are people really going to implement it in anger? So what is the gap then between the roadmap strategy and the reality of execution? I think that for me was one, and I think the other was, what is the convergence between all these things that are being created? And it's almost like there's this diversion at the minute of SAP products. Everyone's doing their own thing in mobility. And how is that going to converge on an overall platform? I think the third dimension is, how are SAP really going to monetize mobility? And are people really ever going to buy a platform at all? Because SAP customers aren't used to buying platform. They're used to buying solution.
Now, Kevin, I've been monitoring your summer whereabouts, in particular your rather humorous Eggs with Benedict tour, in which you were not able to obtain any eggs until I think your last port of call there. But you were hobnobbing with customers, partners across the UK. So what kinds of things are you picking up on that are sticking in your craw?
Yeah, I guess some of the things that really stand out is everybody I was talking to is very interested in mobility. As we all know, it's one of those top three IT priorities. But what I find is there's a huge difference between everybody wanting mobility out the line of business and corporate IT trying to figure out what to do across the enterprise. And across the enterprise, those guys are just frozen. They still don't know what to do. And I talked to a couple dozen different companies during that Eggs with Benedict tour. And what that was is I'd do a 3-hour breakfast presentation and then move on to the next city on behalf of some systems integrators. But really, everybody recognizes a need for mobility. They're implementing mobility at the line of business, but at the corporate IT, they really don't know what to do with it. So I think that it's just going to take a lot of apps being out there on the Sybase and Wired platform before there's enough momentum where people can say, okay, at the corporate IT level, let's standardize on a middleware. But before there's apps using it, I think they're going to be frozen. What do you think on that, Mr. Appleby?
I think there is some of that going on, but I think that we're starting to see that move now today. So for me, since TechEd, there's been a little bit of a shift. I wouldn't say it's an avalanche or anything, but there are snowballs coming, and I know I'm dealing at least with one of SAP's very largest customers, for which we're building out something like 14 potential use cases for mobility, and trying to build those into a roadmap, trying to align that with the app product strategy versus what they want to build out themselves. So there's definitely a business imperative coming from corporate IT on that. And I think that is being caused by the momentous shift in the line of business demand that you described.
So are customers clear on what SAP's roadmap is, or are they confused? Because I have to tell you, I sat in on a SAP roadmap mobility webinar, and I learned a lot about some of the apps that are coming, but I can't say I'm particularly clear on the roadmap. In particular, I don't think SAP's done a terrific job of distinguishing what is available in Sybase Sunwire Platform 2.0 versus what's coming in the next version, how Gateway fits in on a specific version level. Are customers confused, or are they clear on what's happening here?
John, what do you hear? And I'll let you start with that one.
Yeah, happy to kick off on that. Well, kind of, I see that as one of the roles that I do. So yes, I think they are confused, but I think that there is clarity in SAP's messaging that isn't necessarily hitting the market, and that should be the job of the local SAP sales officers and the integrators to clarify that on a case-by-case basis, because really to understand an organization's mobility strategy, you have to understand the line of business demand, and then you have to make that coherent. So yes, there's confusion, but I think that there is enough information out there to clarify that. Kevin, what's your sense?
Yeah, I think they have to have, as you pointed out, a line of business strategy. What mobile apps do they actually need to run their business better before middleware makes sense at all? And so until they know what each of their line of business or their departments or what the aggregate demand is for mobility within the enterprise, they're going to be frozen on the middleware is how I'm seeing it. But once they have a good idea about what they want, then they can kind of reverse engineer that to what do they need internally to support that. That's how I see it in the mobile middleware space. And, it's my perspective also that just about everybody I talk to, they all seem to believe that Afaria in the mobile device security, mobile app security, mobile user and data security, that's a no-brainer. Everybody believes they need that or some equivalent. It's the middleware beyond that in the SUP stuff where they have their confusion. So I've actually seen through some discussions with SAP or with both Sybase and the SAP guys that they're kind of leading in with Afaria and almost extending SUP as an extension to Afaria, with Afaria being the driver. I'm seeing more of that out there. Are you seeing any of that?
No, they're quite the opposite. I think there's not a great understanding locally here in the United Kingdom on Afaria's capabilities, because, like you say, device management is a no-brainer. People have been using BlackBerry Enterprise Server BES for years, so they already get device management. Mm-hmm. But of course, BES doesn't extend out to the other devices, really. So they understand there's the need for more devices, which is driven through the business. I mean, they're there whether you like them or not. As the need for that comes along, along comes the need for better device management. And the way SAP sell this stuff, they will bundle Afaria with that and try to monetize that accordingly.
Yeah, but what I'm seeing out there is that as you said and I said earlier here, device management, app management, data management, that's a no-brainer. Everybody recognizes they need it. But the confusion is, what do you do in the mobile middleware space beyond that, with synchronization and with all those kinds of supported environments? So that at least from a category standpoint, they seem to understand the category of security and not understand the category of mobile middleware. That's what I hear right now.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think that kind of paralysis is also caused by those lines. So you've got a line of business demand, and that demand can be very, very strong. I mean, it can be, we're having this app, we're having it with or without you, we'll go and buy something else if you don't deliver it. I've heard that message that strong. And then IT says, well, we've got security concerns, we've got information asset concerns, we've got governance concerns, we've got synchronization concerns, we've got all these worries. But they can't build the business case for the platform without, and we're coming back to my point 3, aren't we? There, they can't build the business case of the platform without several line of business demands being cohesive, and that takes time.
Absolutely. And one other, John, just kind of extend on that question there, where I see a confusion in the ISV area, so the SAP mobility vendor ecosystem, if you would, is that we're hearing different numbers. I think, John, you and I, when we were talking to Nick Brown, we're thinking that we're hearing 19 mobile apps. Then I heard other people talk about 40 SAP Sybase mobility apps. And then in an interview with the Sybase guy last week that I published, he talked about 100 new SAP or Sybase apps that are coming out. And what in my discussions with the ISV community, I've seen many of these ISVs kind of stepping back from the SAP ecosystem now and saying, look, I have no idea where I can make money in the SAP ecosystem, because I'm hearing about now 100 apps and they're not telling me what they are. So where am I supposed to fill the gap and offer value into this ecosystem? To me, it seems too risky, too expensive to invest in the SAP ecosystem when I have no idea if I will end up competing directly with SAP. So three in particular that I've seen at the Sapphires and the TechEds just said, you know what, we're really taking a pause and stepping back until we see down the road where there's going to be a gap that we can help SAP fill.
So Kevin, isn't that a really serious problem then? Because SAP has stated that they expect partners to build out 80 to not upwards maybe to 90% of all mobile apps, and you're saying that one of the key customer drivers is the availability of great apps, and we're going to need partners to build those apps. So how do we resolve this like logjam and confusion around this?
Well, I think SAP wants the flexibility to identify the most, the areas where there's the biggest demand, where they can make the most money. So they're keeping
you bet your ass
they're holding
they
their
do.
cards to their chest.
No, but let's look at how this has happened historically, because this is no different to SAP's industry solutions. It's just on a micro level. And in the past, they built out the industry solutions, which are a no-brainer. They'll build out the apps, which are a no-brainer. That's what they're doing. And then when partners have built out industry solutions or apps that worked, SAP have either acquired them or developed their own. I kind of anticipate that something similar is going to happen here, isn't it?
I would think so, but it depends on what SAP wants to do. They can be reactive or they can be proactive. If they really wanted the ISV and the ecosystem to be aggressively building out apps right now, they would be a lot more clear on where there's going to be a need and where they're not going to develop and what they are going to develop. And right now, John, maybe you have better clarity. I don't have a lot of clarity on what these 100 apps are.
I don't have clarity on it. What about you, John? Are we hearing anything through the bloggers program or anything?
I mean, last time I heard there were 2 apps. Now we should be clear. 2 apps running on Sybase 2.0, right?
Yeah.
So that's a big distinction, because there's also business objects, mobility apps and stuff that are not yet running on that platform that are supposed to be transitioned by the fall. So I'm sure there's other apps that fit that category, which may be one reason why the numbers are so wonky. But the last time I heard, there were 2. So at least built by SAP. And then I think with partners thrown in, I don't know what it is. I've heard numbers around 30.
I think it's 20 to 30 in the App Store anyway that exist. But a lot of those are real niche things that are very specific.
Let's be clear, though. There isn't really a mobility app store, is it? I thought it was basically EcoHub.
It's EcoHub, but we can, yeah.
Right. So
yeah,
it's a subsection of EcoHub dedicated to mobile apps.
Yeah. Yeah, and how generic those are, who knows?
Right.
Although in the last week when I was interviewing some Sybase guys, the term enterprise app store was dominant in that discussion, because they believe that the role of Sybase and SAP is to prepare an infrastructure and framework to support thousands of mobile applications down the road. So they're really looking at it and saying, look, middleware is needed, security is needed, an app store is needed for deployment, implementation, versioning, all this kind of stuff. So they're really making a big deal about trying to create the right environment to support thousands of mobile apps.
And I
so
would
they certainly talk a lot about it.
I would argue that means moving it off of EcoHub then. That's a whole nother conversation maybe. Okay, so Kevin, you tried to reassure me by saying that the middleware confusion isn't that important to customers because they care more about other stuff, but let's resolve the middleware confusion anyway. So SUP 2.0 is in ramp up now, is this correct? Where are we?
Well, I think they were supposed to come out with 2.1 in September. That's what we were told, right, John?
That's what we were told. I mean, we were told that the 2.0 should be going GA anytime soon. I've not seen a confirmed announcement on that yet. So they're expecting that anytime soon. 2.1.
So it's like a horse race between SUP 2.0 and BI 4.0 then.
It's like a donkey race, yeah.
All right, so there's that, and then 2.1, which is the release that's tied to Gateway.
Yeah, we're hearing we heard in Sapphire a September timeline. But that was pretty unofficial. That wasn't an official announcement. A September timeline for it to go into ramp up. Typically software slips, right? So we're looking at a Q4 timeline for ramp up, end of Q2, beginning of Q3 timeline for GA, I guess, if we're being reasonably optimistic. And I don't know what your sense is, Kevin, but my sense is 2.1 is where the real action is. That's when it really comes of age.
Well, that's what Nick Brown told us at Sapphire, is that, he was talking at that time about 19 apps coming out. 3 of them were going to come out right away. 16 were waiting for 2.1 because they were going to take advantage of the HTML5 container that 2.1 was including. So it seemed to be really pushing HTML5 and the next version to see the majority of the apps they were talking about at Sapphire.
Yeah, I think all of the apps at Sapphire, aside from these 2 that have been released, they were all built on a beta version of the 2.1 platform. So definitely from an app perspective, that is, so we're really looking at hopefully Sapphire of next year for these things to be really released to the mass market, right?
So what's your take on Gateway and mobility? Obviously, Gateway has more functions in the SAP universe than mobility, but do you think that's going to have a big impact, or is it more HTML5 and more just general 2.1 stuff?
I'll go first if you like, Kevin, on that. My sense is that Gateway here and HTML5 there go hand in hand. So if you are building out an instant value app where you're looking at an online scenario for recording of information or extractive information from a live system, then the 2.1 platform with HTML5 and Gateway is going to be golden. Where you're looking at the more complicated app, where you need user experience as a primary, I think we're still going to be building out native apps using the Unwired platform, just as you do today. And there will be then a mix of synchronized content and online content. And again, Gateway comes into its own for that online content when you want to get stuff out easily and quickly. So I think that Gateway is going to be used in both scenarios, but the synchronized content will be necessary for a lot of those more complex enterprise apps. What do you reckon, Kevin?
Yeah, just to add on to that, I've been in Australia on 2 different trips here over the last couple of months, and in both cases, the emphasis has been on how much is the environment still requires synchronization offline and online applications, because you get a few miles away from the coast in Australia and you're in connectivity challenged areas, and right. So when you talk to the railroads, the utilities, it's absolutely required. And in a recent interview of the Sybase team in the UK, the guy was sharing with me that in 3 known locations between his house and the office, there's no connectivity, even in the UK. And so if you need to have applications that work in all areas, and you're looking at a global perspective, Africa, Latin America, Australia, all those areas require those kinds of rich clients that can operate in an offline, online environment. So, it's when you talk to a lot of people here in the States and a lot of startups, they kind of blow that off as that's old-fashioned, you don't need that anymore. But when you look at a global perspective, you absolutely need that. And so there's even more requirement today than in the past.
Yeah, I don't think that is going to go away in the short, medium, or even maybe in the long term. Maybe it will just get more acute. And again, I guess I'm sure you know, Kevin, but the listeners may not, that on top of that, there's 2 different kinds of data replication in the Unwired platform. We have number 1, which is what the Unwired platform built on, which is data replication, where we take stuff out of a database table in our source and we present it to the mobile device, and then we build logic on top. And we also have this concept of MBOs, where we can use existing SAP functions to push data out to the device in a native format. Both can do push, of course, but they work slightly differently. So additional to that, you have a choice. If you're using the MBO, and I love this slide that they demonstrated, you still need the Netweaver Mobile platform. I don't think that is going away anytime soon.
So why don't you help me understand that? I had somebody the other day ask me about Netweaver Mobile, and I was told by SAP that Netweaver Mobile was just going to be absorbed into SUP. and was no longer going to be a standalone external app, but
Here we
part
go.
of SAP. So what are you hearing now?
I don't know the internal story, but you and I were both in the room in Boston, and someone, I forget who it was. Was it Torsten, stood up and said, I said, so what are you doing with Netweaver Mobile? He says, well, we're just going to kind of recompile it into the Unwired platform. And I said, okay, I think it may be harder than that. And what happened with the latest slide was they'd kind of moved Netweaver Mobile into the Unwired platform, but they colored it the same color as the Netweaver stack. I think it's aspirational for them to get rid of Netweaver Mobile, but there is the orchestration engine within that contains a lot of complexity, and that's what does the clever stuff to talk to SAP. I don't see how they can get rid of that complexity short term, especially when they're focusing on HTML5, which is good, and they should be focusing on that. They're focusing on gateway support or OData specifically, and they're focusing on apps. I mean, those are the core focus areas, and I think that they're neglecting, probably rightly, Netweaver Mobile in the meantime, and they're stabilizing that product instead.
So John, let me throw out a question here, if I could.
Yeah, sure.
Is there really any viable option other than SUP and Netweaver Mobile, or should people just take a step and build out that platform and start building mobile apps on it, because there's really not a viable alternative, is there?
Well, you know as well as I do that there is a whole bunch of alternative vendors in the market that you could go to, all of which have got point solutions, some platforms like Cyclo and their platform, and everything in between. So there are a bunch of non-SAP alternatives, but within the SAP space, no. And actually, I don't think the Unwired platform is all that bad. I mean, we're building projects based on it, and they're going okay. I mean, I don't see the issue. The issue, and I guess this would be, John, this might be a great time to move on to that, is how do you afford the platform, and is it even the right way to sell it?
Yeah, I mean, that's, as we think about this last section of our conversation, I think we should look ahead towards TechEd and what developers' expectations are. And one of the barriers to development on SAP platforms is the cost and legal barriers to entry. So what do you think? Should SAP give the platform away and make it like Apple's, almost like an Apple style, which isn't totally easy entry. Apple still validates stuff, but should SAP go that direction? What do they need to do to engage developers?
Oh, Kevin, do you want to run with that, or shall I?
Not really, but well, they charge for Netweaver, which is an integration application environment. They're going to need to charge for this, of course, and I think there's an absolute value. I mean, I started using the Sybase, the predecessor to the Sybase Unwired platform. It was called iAnywhere or SQL Anywhere back in 2004, and we did over 200 enterprise mobility solutions on it. It works, and there was a lot of value, and I was paying I paid an OEM license for every user that used that clear back to 2004. So whatever model they choose to go in to try to synchronize it or make it align with SAP's model, there's a great deal of value. But the challenge is, outside of an application, people don't see a value for mobile middleware. So I would suggest it would be a much easier sell for SAP to tie whatever fees they need to cover Sybase Unwired platform to an actual app, so that they are recognizing value through the app, and at that point I think people understand that they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I'm going to go in even stronger than that. I mean, I hear what you say, Kevin, in 2004, but in 2004 I'd like to bet money that you were building out blue-collar apps that had very measurable value and large volumes of people. Is that right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, and the market's moved since then. I mean, the blue-collar stuff still exists, but the demand now is from the line of business, where the business case is tougher, and also the consumption model for consumers has changed. Those guys are used to paying dollars per app or dollars per month, things like Evernote and things like that, and that's the model they're used to. I think that SAP can't afford to think that they're going to monetize a platform. It's not the way they monetize the business suite, because the business suite is they get effectively by industry solution, by by user, and that's how people are used to consuming that. To try and charge for a platform actually goes against the strength of the SAP sales team itself. Those guys are used to selling solutions and not platform. They're also going to struggle to know how to sell a platform alone, and that's definitely what we're seeing today. And I truly believe that they should create that app store. They should create it quick, and they should start charging dollars per app per month.
And on that same line, I would jump back into that ISV discussion and say if they can be clear on where there's opportunities for ISVs, then they will get a lot more ISVs jumping in there to deliver areas that they think are needed.
Yeah, and I think that SAP should do what Apple do. I mean, it's okay to charge to submit an app or to have a developer license. It's okay. The ISVs will pay that if there's value. And also, they can take some of those dollars per user per month off the ISV. They can charge 30% like Apple. And in return, they need what's different to Apple. I think they need to offer some kind of support.
So, guys, we have a rolling TechEd schedule throughout the fall. It starts in Vegas in September. Look forward to seeing you guys there and finishing this discussion up probably over some drinks there. But it's going to span through the fall. And when we look back on the series of TechEds that we're going to have, how if we say like SAP had a successful TechEd when it came to mobility, what kinds of things are we going to need to hear and see in order to say that?
I think TechEd is all about developer enablement. A successful TechEd leaves a groundswell of people on the ground who are better informed about how to get a product, the value of a product, and how to deliver on the product. If Chip and Philippe and his team and their teams manage to deliver quality sessions which give people real deep dives, because that's what the technical people want to see, the developers want. They want deep dives, they want hands-on, they want to be using that stuff. And we got the line of businesses pushing here, and we'll have the developers pushing here, and IT spend and procurement are going to be squashed in the middle, and that is what will generate demand in the market. And I think that's what a successful TechEd should do.
I like that, John. I think that would make a nice PowerPoint slide with the hands coming up and down like that.
Yeah.
Crushing the IT business spend right in the middle. I like that. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I share all the same thoughts as John, and at the same time, I would just say they need answers. If you can lay out an answer where they can say, look, here's my environment, here's my situation, here's my use case, and you can be pointed to 2 or 3 models that would work. So you're getting them into a position they can execute and implement. If you simply say there's 1,000 different ways of implementing what you need, that does not help. If you send somebody back to their enterprise with answers and direction, and where they can choose A, B, or C, so they can do some research and have a very defined understanding of which one of those, A, B, or C, is the best for their company, then they can make a buying decision and start executing. So that's what I would hope, is that there's answers for the different situations, so you're directing people down a very directed and guided path. That's what's needed.
I'm going to build on what you guys both said. I agree with all of it. And I would go one step further with Kevin with your comments there, because I think SAP is, hearing some of the recent webinars around mobility, I think SAP is making some of the same mistakes they've made with HANA, which is perhaps to spend a little too much time on the glamorous long-term vision and not enough time specifically explaining to customers what the practical use cases are right now. What's available with this release? What can you do with this right now? What apps are available right now? What, as you said, in terms of partners, here's what we're going to develop in the next quarter. Here's what we're not going to develop. And I don't think SAP should shy away from the practical use cases that add value right now. And I don't think it detracts from the long-term vision to acknowledge in the short term what the issues are. What I get frustrated in is when I see a slide that shows Gateway integrating with SAP, knowing full well that that's not available to a customer right now. And I sit through a webinar and I don't see any clarification on that. And I think at TechEd I would like to see SAP spell that out a lot more clearly, because I don't think customers have any issue with straight talk around that stuff. I think they would prefer that than a grandiose vision of thousands of apps that don't currently exist. So that's what I'd
Yeah,
like to see.
I would add to that. I posted a little bit of opinion matter on Friday on my blog, mobileenterprisestrategies.com, and what I said in there is that Sybase needs to be very clear on what they support. They can't be fuzzy with developers because developers are going to go back and start executing what they heard, and it better be right. One of the examples is they said, yeah, Faria supports Microsoft mobile operating environments, but they're not clear that they don't yet support Windows Phone 7. They also say, yes, we support Android, but they don't tell you that it's only Android on specific manufacturer's device. They do broad statements of Android. Well, it's not the case. They don't support all Android manufacturers. It has to be a device and manufacturer specific support. So they need to narrow it down, especially when they're talking about the guys that are writing an order today for devices or getting ready to implement a very specific project. And they're deciding right now they're going to use Windows Phone 7 because they heard from Sybase that it's supported. Well, it's not supported yet. It's somewhere down the roadmap. So they need to be very specific with the guys that are actually implementing.
I think they do, and again, just adding a bit more, I think it's even crazier, and I've seen some roadmap slides that have playbook on it. I mean, why even invest in a platform that was dead before it was born? I don't know if I'm stepping over the line on that one, Kevin, but I mean, they're losing money on every device they're selling. This is not a platform which is worthy of development for the kind of spend that you have to do, especially to develop out on the unwired platform, which is very costly for SAP to extend to a new device because of the amount of complexity in there. The playbook's just crazy.
John, there goes the free playbook that I was hoping Rim was going to send me. Man, he screwed things up for me again. Man. But I think we've been off the grid for about 5 minutes now. But I think the one thing I will say is that, it's going to be interesting to see how Sybase presents itself to us, both as bloggers and analysts and as customers. I think they're getting a little better feel for how that dialogue works at SAP. We had some interesting sessions at Sapphire, and I'm really curious to see if they can follow through on some of the same at TechEd.
Yeah, let me just add that sorry, John, I'll just jump in here real quick. I see a huge amount of progress, both from SAP and Sybase. This is a learning curve for everybody, and it's a new market, it's new technology. But I have absolutely seen maturity at each step of the way, where they're learning what questions they need to have answers for, and they're making progress all along. So our good-natured ribbing or criticism of Sybase and SAP, I don't want it to be mistaken for saying we don't see progress. We see massive progress. We're just pointing out some additional areas that there's room for growth.
Yeah, I mean, as we said at the beginning, SAP 2.0 is a platform on which we're delivering projects, and that's the change since Sapphire. Let's not forget that that didn't happen before. Not on 1.5. There were very few projects. Now we're seeing projects on 2.0.
Well, and one thing I was encouraged by is that I remember having a debate with an SAP executive a while back who told me, well, Sybase is an independently run company, so that's why we're not engaging in the same way, because they're off doing their own thing. And I was like, well, actually, mobility is kind of important to everybody now. Like, you can't like silo that. And there was kind of a grudging acknowledgement. I mean, how can you argue against that, right? But what I was impressed by at Sapphire, and I hope to see continue, is there seems to be a coordinated effort, not just with the ERP 6.0 release, but looking at all-in-one, by design, business one, and basically how the mobility developments within Sybase and SAP are trickling into all the platforms in a coordinated way. And the more we see that, I think the more you're going to see SAP really differentiate itself. And when you talk about business objects applications now integrated with the Sybase platform in the next 6 months, that's yet another point of that's the direction that we're all looking for, is more kind of a messy stew of ingredients as opposed to a siloed operation,
Let me ask you a question on that one, John. So today, let's suppose I use Webby or Explorer for iPad. Both of those are available on the Apple App Store, and they're both natively built apps. And I've heard kind of various statements of intent to run those things and others on the Unwired platform, including the HANA apps and various other things. Now today I pay my license fee for that app or for that usage type or the user or whatever, and then I'm free to use it. Now if they move that to the Unwired platform, do you think that SAP is going to look to monetize that by getting the customer then to pay for the Unwired platform again? And do you think that they'll see any value in that?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, you put me on the spot answering pricing questions for SAP. Uh, Officially, SUP is in ramp-up, so we don't talk about pricing yet, John. You should know better. But
Oh, really?
having said that, I wouldn't be surprised if SAP does try to charge for speaking just from my own observation, just because I feel like that's how SAP's been going about it up until this point. I think the arguable value proposition around it to make that case would be that one of the things that companies are struggling with around enterprise mobility is how to manage a landscape. What do they call it, an MEAP or whatever, or MEAP? But basically, how do I manage this on an enterprise-wide basis? Because suddenly you have 30 or 40 apps, and they're not secure, they're not centrally organized and coordinated, and to me, that's probably the biggest value that we're talking about. Maybe connections to ERP data is another piece of it, but I think the biggest piece is the overall mobility landscape management. I think that's where SAP would argue the value is. What do you think, Kevin?
I don't know. Every time I ask or interview anybody, they back off. So I'm not even going to venture down that path. I can't get answers from anybody. So.
Well, we started in confusion and we ended in confusion. So I'm not sure we totally accomplished our goals, but I think we gave it a really good swing, though. You guys have any final comments?
Well, I'll just share some of the things I'd like to see at TechEd. I'd like to learn more about Sybase 365 and how it fits into everything. Especially when you look outside of the Western economies, you see a huge demand for SMS-based business apps and enterprise apps. I'd like to learn a lot more about that area. Also, how do these mobility platforms like SAP and Afaria actually work in the cloud? I'm seeing more and more enterprise mobility vendors actually build their businesses in the cloud and offer cloud-based integration and cloud-based applications and even cloud-based development of applications. I wonder how that fits into their model as well. So those are some of the questions I'd like to just learn what Sybase's and SAP's thinking is around those areas.
Yeah, and for me, John, it is just everything that we discussed. It is for TechEd, it's all about the developers. It's getting those guys using that product and that's what it's about. And so that's what a successful TechEd is going to be about. And with that, a roadmap which gives some honesty. I love what Thomas Zurek from the BW team does with BW. Here's what's available today. Here's what's available tomorrow. Here's what you can do now. Here are the improvements. And that level of honesty from within the Unwired platform team, I think, would reap huge benefits. The third dimension is, guys, come on, get the 2.1 platform out as fast as possible. Get the apps out to the customers. It doesn't matter to some extent. It's an early product. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit early, but let's get that stuff out to the market.
Agreed. Get your feet and your hands dirty as soon as possible. Demos, sandboxes, give it to us. We're ready to dig in. I think we might hear a little bit about something called Phoenix as well. I don't know if you've heard much about that, but I think it's another cool thing SAP's working on to make HTML5 related to mobile development easier. But I guess that's all the teaser I can give you because I don't know more about it. But maybe we'll hear more at TechEd. So we shall see. Of course, by then it'll probably have a different name. So, well, guys, it was a pleasure, John. I think you have a hard stop. Something about dinner keeping you waiting.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I have a dinner appointment to make, so I'm keeping my commercial director waiting.
All right, well, you tell him that you recorded an awesome kick-ass video cast, so it's worth the wait. So, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Have a great evening. Bye.
Talk to you later.